y'all doing today? You know, back last year I had this crazy idea. I know it's hard to believe me having a crazy idea. But anyway, a deer would come up in my pasture out there. I'd feed them corn and they'd come up and they'd eat corn. I found it relaxing, just sit and look at them out the window. And it got to where they would come up to the edge of the woods when they'd hear me coming down there and spreading that corn out. They'd hear that corn right around in that bucket and they'd stand out there in the edge of the woods and wait for me to go back in the house. I had this bright idea that I was going to rope one of those deer. I drove my truck out in the pasture and kind of parked it kind of catty cornered, you know, made a little V shape up against a bunch of trees that had fell down and stacked on top of each other. Figured I might need a little chute if I had to. But I got over in that tall grass and I threw the corn out in a little open spot right there close to the tall grass, and I squatted down and had my rope there ready. Wasn't long, about 20 minutes went by. There was 3 deer come out there in that pasture and I squatted down waiting on them. One of them got close to me and I said, "Well, bud, you the one." So I jumped up and I throwed that rope around his neck and he just stood there and looked at me kind of funny. I took a step toward him and he took a step back. When he took a step back, I reached and grabbed that rope and I twisted it around my hand good. I took it around behind me and I wrapped it around my other hand and I had it wrapped around my back, you know, around my waist so I'd get a good foot and good hold on it. And I gave that little deer a little tug with that rope. I was educated right then. Funny thing, while you stand there looking at them and they're on the other rope, they kind of confused a little bit, but when you give them that little tug, they explode. Second thing I learned, that pound for pound, the deer is a lot stronger than a cow or a colt. They put up a fight, bud. I can fight down a cow or a colt pretty good with a rope with a little bit of dignity. But this thing, not a chance. Went crazy. It ran and it bucked and it twisted and pulled and there wasn't no control of it. You can forget that. And it jerked me off my feet and started dragging me across the ground. And I hadn't think about it, and a deer on a rope wasn't really that good of an idea in the first place. He was dragging me around pretty good. The upside to it is they don't have very much stamina. Their energy comes in bursts and then they die off a little bit. About 10 minutes later, it got tired and not as near easy to take me off my feet. But it did manage to take me off my feet one more time, and it drugged me a little bit, and it took me a few minutes to realize that since I was mostly blinded by the blood that was flowing out of a big gash on my forehead, at that point, I lost the taste for corn-fed venison. I just wanted to let that devil creature go. But I figured if I let it go and it's got the rope around its neck, that rope's gonna get tangled up and it'll die a slow, painful death, and I didn't want that. I didn't want it. But at the time, there wasn't no love lost between me and that deer. And at the moment, I hated that thing, and I'm pretty sure it was mutual between the two of us. Despite the gash in my head and the big knots on my head where I had cleverly tried to position myself up against larger rocks to slow the deer down from dragging me, another great idea. I can still think enough to realize that there's a chance that I shared some tiny amount of responsibility of this situation. I didn't want the deer to suffer a slow death, so I managed to get it lined up between the truck and those trees. And I kept coming toward it and kept coming toward it, and it kind of backed up in there and kind of got a little squeeze play on it. And when it did, I reached up there to get that rope off around its neck, and I eased that rope up a little bit, and that deer was standing there. Did you know deer bite? Oh my God. And they don't bite like a horse. You know how a horse will grab a hold of you like that and they just kind of slide their teeth off and step back away from it? A deer grabs a hold and bites down real hard and goes to shaking violently around his head. I mean, he goes to shaking all kinds of things, kind of like a pit bull when he grabs a hold of you. That was the third lesson that I learned. Now, I know probably the proper thing to do when a deer bites down on you like that is to stand real still and remain calm. But I couldn't do it. I mean, after screaming like a little girl at the top of my lungs, all that did was upset the deer worse, and he was steady getting on that arm, and he was clamped down. So I eased my other hand up there, and I got that rope off that neck, and when I did, he let go of me, and I figured, if the horse comes at you, the best thing you can do is just stand your ground and lunge at him and spook him, and he'll go back the other way. Well, that don't work with a deer. I hollered and I lunged toward the deer, and did you know that a deer can stand up on his hind legs and just pelt you real good about head and shoulder level with them front hooves? And they're sharp. Took me to the ground, and I curled up in the fetal position holding my head, and I figured sooner or later this thing is going to run off because I gave it the subordinate move, lay down. But no, a deer don't stop. He kept jumping up and down on me and hit me in the head with them front hooves, bouncing on me, took the breath out of me, and he kind of eased off away from me. And I learned a lot that day about deer behavior. I was finally able to crawl up underneath my truck, and deer just kind of eased away. So now you know why when people go deer hunting, they take a rifle with a scope. It kind of evens the odds out a little bit. And this is coming from an educated redneck. That deer taught me a good lesson that day. Y'all have a good day.